Hello, my name is Sid Henderson, and I am a leisure class instructor for the City of Tucson Parks and Recreation. And today, I'm going to show you how to throw a bonsai pot and how to get it ready for decoration so that you can make interlocking patterns. First thing we want to do is wedge our clay so it's nice and even in consistency. And then we're going to slap it into a nice round ball. You'd actually want to wedge this more than I did. I already wedged it, and I was just giving it a little extra wedging just to make sure it was nice and even. All right. All right. So after you slap the clay on the bat to get it to be adhered, we're going to get it wet, seal the sides so that it adheres to the wheel well. And then I always start my centering, which is how you get this ball to be perfectly symmetrical, by first pushing down, because that applies more pressure and presses the clay against the wheel. All right. Got it centered down. Now I have to center it upwards. And when I do this, it evens out the sides of the walls. Just get a little bit more speed here. Here's a tip. If it's hard for you to adjust the speed of your wheel with your foot, you can just use your finger like I'm doing. All right, after I centered up, I'm going to center back down again. And I want my final shape to be more of like a flat pancake, like that. And notice I keep putting pressure on the sides to seal it downwards and make it smooth and circular. Now with this gesture, I'm using this smooth part of my hand, and I'm pushing down on the top to flatten it. And then what you don't see very clearly is that this hand is coming from behind, grinding against the wall like this to smooth the outside. Keep it smooth. All right, so now that I'm happy with the shape, I'm going to start to open this up a little bit. So I'm going to take my hand and turn it into a fist like this. And I'm going to have a lot of liquid on it so that there's no friction. I'm going to push down, and I'm kind of pushing with this bone right here. It's a little wobbly, but that's fine. I'm going to decrease the wheel speed at this point, and that'll help that wobble. So I have here a wooden rib, and this is basically the only tool I really use when I'm throwing, aside from a few. It's just very helpful. So one of the things I'm going to use it for is I'm going to just compress this bottom really hard so that it's smooth and flat. And since it's an orchid pot, it's a bonsai pot, I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom so I can see how deep the base of my pot is. It's pretty thick, so I can afford to move some more clay off the bottom over. I can measure it with my thumb. It's about this thick right now. All right. All right, finished moving my clay over. Now I'm going to re-smooth the base. There we go. All right, Now that we've got our base finished, I'm going to next pull the walls up. So usually when you throw and the clay is really wet, it's going to be kind of weak. So the best thing to do to start your pot off is just to throw a very simple general shape, and if it's a straight wall, it'll be stronger as well. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in from one side, just going to squeeze the wall together, squeeze my two fingers together, and gradually raise my hands. There we go. It's going to pull up a wall. It's important to keep the wall really slick because any friction on the wall is going to cause it to warp out of shape. So you want to always try to keep the walls wet, but you want to keep the floor as dry as possible. That's 2 pulls. I usually do 3 pulls just to get the right wall thickness and to get the right shape. The less pulling you do on your piece, the more like strong and less floppy the wall is going to be. If you overwork a piece, sometimes the walls get really weak and they'll eventually flop over. So I'm going to do 1 more pull just to get as much clay from the bottom of my pot up as possible. There we go. And notice I'm not pulling that fast. You just want to go up nice and slow and keep your pressure even, and that'll help keep the walls strong, and it'll keep your rim from becoming wobbly. So now I'm going to dry the walls out so I can reshape them a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my wooden rib. I'm just going to drag it across the inside of my piece, and that gets rid of all the slip and smooths the wall out. And then I'm going to go on the opposite side, take the rib, smooth it up the side of the wall. That gets rid of any excess moisture and also dries the wall out. There we go. Now I'm going to wash off my hands really good, because clay and electronics don't mix. And I'm going to hit it with a heat gun. So what I'm doing is I'm just pushing it against the wall, just holding it against the wall here, and the wheel is still rotating, and I'm just slowly moving it up and down. There we go. All right, so at this point, the walls of your piece should feel a lot like the clay fresh from the bag, where it's still moist and slick, but it's a lot stiffer than what you were throwing. It's not floppy at all. And if it's like that, then we can start to take our wooden rib and shape our vessels by just pressing on different sides. So in order to get the shape that I'm after, the first thing I'm going to do is press in on this side. I'm just coming from underneath, and I'm using the rib to sort of press an arch shape around the foot. I'll slow it down just a little more too. You don't have to go very fast at this point either. All right. This made a shape on the outside. I'm going to burnish the floor a little bit too. That'll help strengthen the wall. And then I'm going to gently come in on the inside, and I'm going to stretch the rim of this out quite a bit. And this will greatly increase its diameter and decrease its height. The reason I had to dry it out first is because I couldn't get away with doing this when it was wetter. It would just flop over. But now you can see there's a really gorgeous sort of undulating S shape. Pull the walls up a bit like that. Now, one of the final things that a lot of what I see a lot in a lot of traditional like Japanese plant pottery is a sort of flat plated rim. So the way you make that, it's not that hard at all actually, is I'm going to squeeze water above my fingers like this, and you can see how the water is trickling down the sides of my fingers. So I'm going to do that so that it will just form a moist, slick ring around just the rim, nothing else. Because we don't want the other parts of the walls to get too wet. And then you're going to go like that. So there we go. And that makes a nice flat plated rim. You can even come in with a rib and define it a little better, make like a nice little sharp angle by pushing in like that and pushing down on top. Now that that's done, I'm going to hit the walls again with the heat gun. We just want to make sure everything gets nice and dried out. All right, so how do we get this guy off of the bat and onto the plaster bat? Now, not everyone needs to do this, but I want to do it because I want that base to dry as fast as the rim. So first thing I'm going to do is take out my wooden rib, the one I'm always using. And I'm going to cut a little groove into the base. That really helps direct the wire that I'm going to use. The next thing we're going to need is a lot of water for the bat, because the water is going to form a slick to help us get the piece off. So I just squeeze in a whole bunch of water like that, and then I'm going to use my finger and just channel it, there we go, directly up to the base of the pot, just like that. I'm going to thrust the wire against the bat. Keep your fingers down. Keep the wire as tight as possible pulled towards you. All the way, even if it already detaches. Although if it detaches, that's a good thing, because that's going to make our job easier. And then we're just going to gently rotate our pot off of the little pad of clay and catch it. See how my right hand is underneath it? It's just sliding right onto it. And plop it right there. I had a instructor who said it was like, you need to be gentle, like you're giving birth to a child. Like he even had his students, well, like you're helping give birth to a child, like you're catching it. So like he would have his students make like noises when they caught the pot, because you have to be kind of like gentle and very careful. I always tell that story. It's always funny. There we go. Okay, so now that it's on a plaster bat, the water is also going to get sucked out of the bottom of the pot while the rim is drying, which is great. But I also pre-dried the base really well before I slid it off, because I needed that base to be stiff and not warp while I moved it. Okay. Well, I'm back, and at this point now, the piece is leather hard and I can trim it. Now it's a little bit on the soft side, but that's fine. Just have to be careful. I have a few tools more tools now than I did before. First is, this is your standard loop trimming tool. And I use this to sort of get into hard to reach places. And this is a Japanese trimming tool that I made from an old rusty file. And so I made this one myself. All you have to do is heat up the end of a file, bend it into a right angle, and then grind the blades in this way so that I can get in there and cut things away. And this is great for taking care of large surface areas. Next thing I have is an X-Acto knife, and I also have a set of drill bits for my electric drill, and I can go over how we use those later. And then finally I have a 4B graphite pencil. It doesn't really matter. HB can work too, just the softer it is, the less you have to press against your piece. I'll be using this to mark pieces in such a way that I can create patterns on the outside. So I've already centered my piece on the wheel, and I do that by just rotating the wheel like this and tapping on it until I can see visually that it's completely centered, like it won't wobble or anything like that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define this area from here to here and make like a decorative base ring. So first thing I'm going to do is come in here with my trimming tool and trim a nice little ring like that. And that's going to separate the top half from the bottom half. And I can switch to this guy, my kana, and that'll trim it so that it's perfectly smooth and flush. And I'll go back in here, clean up the edge here like that. And use this rounded part, and I'm going to subtract a little bit. There we go. And I still have the wooden rib, and this is actually handy for burnishing some of those tool marks away. So I can come in here and just polish this down, just like that. And I can use my finger as well, the back of my fingernail, to sort of just polish up this little ridge that I made here. All right, now with that done, I'm going to create a facet so that the foot doesn't chip. So usually it's a good idea not to have a sharp corner on the outside of your foot, because that will cause a chip to occur later on when you're moving it around and using it. So what I'm going to do is just bevel that like this. And then I go once around the outside just to make sure it's nice and flat. And then I can start on the inside and work my way out. So first I like to draw just a little line so I know where the end of my foot is going to be. So it's going to be just past that line there. And then I'll take my kana, which is the Japanese trimming tool, and just carve away. I usually like to take more out of the center first and then work my way out. The reason I like doing that is because the thinner the foot gets, the weaker. So if I take stuff out of the center first, then there's more structural support on the outside. Another thing you can do, since it has a hole in the bottom, so you can take the X-Acto blade and just cut a nice little hole out like that. And that'll also tell you how much you need to take away from the inside. So I want to take away quite a bit, make a nice deep foot. The trick is you don't want to push too hard while trimming, because that might actually make the foot bow inward. So you want to push on it as lightly as possible to get the job done, and just let the tool cut. It does help to occasionally pick the tool up, just get in there and clean the little bit of clay that's in the blade off. I'm just going to mark the outside of the pot with a pencil mark so I can decorate it. So if you have a set of drills, you can make extra holes in the base just by sticking them in and twisting them like that. And this is for wiring the roots of your bonsai in place. So you usually do 4. And that makes quick, clean little cuts. All right. Now, when you want to mark your pot to do patterns, all you have to do is take a pencil, and like every inch or so, you can make a ring, just like that. Put a few rings on the inside of the feet too, because I'm going to decorate the foot. To make a line of longitude, what you're going to do is take your pencil and gently draw a line straight down on the opposite side of the pot, straight down on the pot closest to you, rotate it 90 degrees, add another line, on both sides. And then just keep doing this until you've covered your pot in a grid. This way, when you make a pattern, it'll always alternate and you won't wind up with 2 pieces that match next to each other, and then you'd have to restart the pattern. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this demo. My name is Sid Henderson. I'm a leisure class instructor for the City of Tucson Parks and Recreation. I teach ceramics, and I also work in borosilicate glass over in the glass studio, and I'm also the head ceramics tech here. If you want more information, please visit easyreg.com and find the classes, and you can look up classes you'd like to register and register today. Be lovely to have you, and if you really like science and that sort of stuff behind the art, I'm the perfect guy for you.